moderator for today's event. As you all know, over the last few months, the utilities have been involved heavily in masks, and there's so many questions out there. We thought today's event would give some clarity, or at least help to, for what's going on in the marketplace. First of all, I'd like to introduce our panel for today's discussion. First, Greg Pierce, Safety Director of the Oregon Safety Group. Greg is the Safety Director for 6 Oregon Electric Co-ops. We also have with us Alex and Roman from Star Building Services. Alex and Roman have an import business with direct contact and contacts in China. The purpose of today's event is to bring, or try to bring, some clarity to the mask situation, both from a supplier side and from the utility perspective with regards to OSHA and other regulatory requirements. These regulatory requirements are changing daily, but we think it is important to understand what the utilities are going through while utilities are faced with during the new requirements. I will start by asking the questions and let our distinguished guest panel answer the questions, and we will start with the supply side with Alex and Roman, and then jump to Greg with comments on from the utilities perspective. But before we begin, if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a place to type in questions, and we'll try to answer those during the course of the discussion. At the end of the webinar, we will also have question and answer period. So with that, we are ready to begin. And the first question for today is what is the difference between the N95 and the KN95 mask? And we'll present that question to Alex and Roman to start.
Rick, thank you very much for the introduction and for having us join. It's definitely an honor and a privilege to be part of your supply system and to be your supplier for these particular respirators. This is a good question that a lot of people are confused about, and we're here to clear up any confusion. N95 is the respirator that is the US standard approved by NIOSH for industrial and other uses, including FDA approval for medical settings. KN95 is the Chinese equivalent of the US standard of N95 respirator, with very minor differences to get certified. They're almost identical standards, but different government certifications. Many countries have their own standard for respirators that are usually very similar. For example, the European equivalent of this particular respirator is the FFP2, which also has very slight variations to the KN95 and N95 standards. KN95 respirators are not NIOSH approved due to the fact that they are a standard from a different country. However, they are allowed to be imported as a substitute to N95 during this pandemic. Most recently, also NIOSH has taken initiative to begin testing and listing some of the KN95 respirators that are arriving into the United States and publishing their results online. For example, 2 of the brands that we recently supplied General Pacific with have recently been tested by NIOSH, and their results have been published online with very good results. To provide a better clarification on the differences between these respirators, I will show a 3M infographic that shows the comparison between them. And I will turn on my screen share. So here I will show a 3M comparison chart Are you guys able to see this?
No, I don't
Okay.
see it.
Okay. I've dropped this file into the file sharing folder, and the main differences, for example, for the US standard for NIOSH approved N95 is to have a filter performance of equal or greater than 95%. It also has to have a flow rate, breathability rate of 85 liters per minute, and a few other specifications and standards. And the Chinese standard for KN95, the Chinese equivalent of N95, has exact same criteria with having a filtration efficiency greater than 95%, exact same breathability flow rate of 85 liters per minute, and the other specifications are almost identical to the NIOSH N95. With that said, Europe has their own standard for this type of respirator. It's called FFP2. It also has very similar criteria and standard to the KN95 and N95 with some variations. Other countries that use similar respirators include Japan, Korea, New Zealand, and they all have very similar standards to the KN95 and N95 respirators. And we hope that clears up some of the confusion and concerns regarding the KN95 and the difference between the N95. And Romo, would you like to add something?
Yeah, there's another small minor difference is that NIOSH masks, the N95s, they have headbands in the back, and the KN95 have the ear loops that go over the ears. So that's like a more of a technical difference as well.
Okay, great. Greg, anything you want to add, any comments? I know you've been exposed to some of this stuff as well. Anything you want to add to this?
No, I think, Alex, you mean from a utility perspective overall in general?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, sure. Now, keep in mind, my perspective is fairly limited. I work with 6 utilities in Western Oregon, all of which I've recommended that they avoid falling into a compliance category where the OSHA's respiratory protection rules apply. In other words, for a utility to require a worker to wear an N95 mask, that puts you into an OSHA respiratory protection program compliance matter. That's pre-pandemic. Now the pandemic comes along and OSHA exempted all employers from that rule. So you can fit and require all your employees to wear N95s, KN95s, any of those respirators without having to comply with the OSHA respiratory protection program currently. At some point, I would expect that OSHA will roll back that exemption, and then employers would have to comply with the respiratory protection program again. But currently, as far as pandemic protection and PPE, the N95s, KN95s are all good PPE to have and to use to protect your workers. It's not the only way to provide protection from, or what I don't want to get too far into the actual objective, but really the mask, the cans and the ends provide a level of filtration protection. Other face coverings really provide for protection of others from the wearer emitting droplets that might carry disease. So you do get additional protection from the N95s and KN95s, but OSHA just wants to see face covering. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you, Greg, very much. We'll move on to our second question. I think we've kind of answered it already, but let's kind of go through that. Question is, are the KN95s considered PPE items? Start out with Alex. You want to go through that? And I think Greg kind of addressed that already, but you want to, anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much. This is a good question. We looked up the definition of PPE on OSHA website, and according to OSHA, respirators are considered PPE, and that includes as well as coveralls, safety glasses, shoe covers. So those are general protective equipment against hazards, chemicals, to protect against illnesses and injuries, and chemicals as well. So according to OSHA, they are considered to be PPE.
Okay. Greg, I think you kind of already addressed that, and I think there's kind of this, there's an exemption right now, as you mentioned before, and who knows what's going to happen down the road. Anything else to add to that one, Greg?
Yeah, the technical definition it depends on a lot of things. Mandatory, voluntarily, as soon as it is officially labeled PPE, then they're, I don't want to confuse the matter, but we'll go with Alex's definition just as a baseline perspective. It's personal protective equipment. That's what it does.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, gentlemen. The next question. How do we make sure, now this is a really good question because this comes up all the time with our customers. How do we make sure we are not receiving counterfeit masks? And this is a big one. So Alex, you want to start out?
Absolutely. Yeah, again, this is a really good question because it's a real concern. There's definitely a lot of concern in the world for receiving counterfeit masks. This was a really big item that happened in the months of February and March, when the demand for these respirators and disposable face masks became so big. And there were a lot of subpar products and counterfeit products that were shipped out of China across the world. So China government did do something about this, and we actually looked up several news articles recently that anyone can search on the web about the new government regulations and export controls that they put in place at the beginning of April to make sure that they minimize the amount of counterfeit products and disposable face masks and respirators that are leaving their countries. They put extremely harsh penalties in place for any factory or business that is producing and exporting these masks to oversee clients and customers, including the United States. The penalties include ranging from large fines to immediate business closure of the factory, as well as actual criminal procedures for repeat offenders. And this has actually quite become easily searched on the news now. I recently read an article in New York Times. They listed all of the measures that China is taking to assure that all the new shipments that are leaving at the beginning of April and currently, that everyone is receiving the product that they're trying to get. So it's currently actually a lot more difficult to export these respirators and disposable face masks out of China than to actually bring them into the United States. The Chinese government officials, together with their customs officials, are checking every shipment, every box, and verifying the documentation matches everything. Every shipment has to have a recent lab test result from the factory for that shipment. and they are checking everything, which is slowing down the export of these products globally. So this is something that we've been dealing with very intimately. We're on the phone, either with the factories or the freight agents or the Chinese customs office to get every shipment cleared. It's become quite a process because they are taking this extremely seriously, and they do want the world to know that they have fixed the problem to a large extent, and they are doing everything they can about this. Roman, would you like to add anything?
I just want to add another thing. So besides the verification with the factory, in China, no exporter will be touching any counterfeit products right now too, because the penalties and fines go to them as well. So they have to actually also clear the packaging requirements too. So unless the masks are actual medical devices, all the packaging has been changed to remove any like medical claims and other things. And if it has it and it's not a medical device, an exporter won't even bother exporting out of the country because it won't be allowed to be exported. So there's checks all the way from factory to exporter to customs to make sure that what's leaving is not what left in February and March.
Right, and we've noticed some changes in the packaging ourselves, where some of them might have come through originally as saying medical or some reference to a medical device, and all that has now been removed from the packaging, as you mentioned. All right, Roman.
Yeah, in addition to that, the Chinese government makes sure that everybody that is involved in the import and export process of these masks has to sign an affidavit that specifically for the factory and also the freight forwarder, that this is an authentic product. It meets the KN95 standard, the government standard. The factory representatives have to sign this affidavit and acknowledge the penalties in place, as well as the freight forwarder who then inspects the shipment. And then the Chinese officials at the export, as well as their customs officials, triple check all these documents, all of the packaging and every product that is leaving. And so everybody's aware that there is serious consequences in place for anyone trying to export any type of counterfeit or subpar product currently.
And this applies not only to face masks. This is any medical products that they implemented these extra measures on.
Great, Greg. Anything? Are your utilities are they voicing concerns as well for this type of these issues?
Yeah, I have heard that. I've heard conversations about concerns. So, it just emphasizes that. We rely on folks like you, Rick, to make sure you do your due diligence to get a good product. So, yeah, we read the stories and often wonder, well, what can we do? What can we do to assure that we're getting a good product? So I'm sure you get maybe even my utility clients calling you and having those conversations with you. Where are they coming from? How can you assure me a good product? Not something that's going to be hazardous to wear itself. So
you're right.
I really don't go down that road, but I don't have the expertise, and I'm not close to the manufacturers like Alex and yourself. But yeah, people are interested and concerned.
Yeah, and we're going to address that as we move down the question list too, as we'll get into a little more details on that one.
And I think too, Rick, that's led to a lot of folks making their own, out of something, taking an FR shirt and cutting it up and making an FR mask.
Sure.
So that way they know what they've got. But,
that's right.
Or maybe it's another reason that they arrive at that, but that's common.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, gentlemen, let's move on to the next question. Okay, how are they stopping? I think we've really already addressed that question. I don't think that we need to, I think we hit it on both of those, so I don't think there's anything else to add to that at this point. Is there?
The additional step that we as an importer and supplier take is we actually pay for our own independent testing from the factories that we work with. And that gives us additional assurance that we're working in supplying a quality product. So besides the testing that is provided to us by the factory, we're also sending our own people to the factories to take random samples of the masks, and we test them ourselves out of our own pocket. So, you know, as far as on our side, we're doing everything. We go above and beyond to make sure that we're bringing authentic and quality product.
Yeah, and you know, and that's important for General Pacific too, you know, because we're here to serve the utilities and to make sure that we're providing them with the right equipment to do their job and not get anybody in trouble and make sure that they're protected the best they can. So,
yeah. Thank
you. Okay, the next question. What is the status on getting KN95s delivered into the U.S.? We've kind of talked about this a little bit as well. Anything else to add on that, Alex?
Yeah. Ron, would you like to start on that?
Well, from the U.S. side, there is the FDA registration. So all the products coming into the U.S. are being registered with the FDA to comply with the rules. As far as in China,
so the China have their own separate registration certification process, similar to the FDA for medical devices. So as far as the products and the factors that we're dealing with, we're only looking at the ones that have current FDA approval, FDA certificate. In addition to that, we have our local agents check their local licenses and make sure that they're approved locally with Chinese government and listed as a medical device manufacturer, and that all of their certifications are up to date. As far as the masks that are actually the status in getting the KN95 masks delivered into the US, as I mentioned earlier, it's now become a lot more challenging to actually bring them in due to all the strict export controls that the Chinese government put in place. They absolutely do not want to have any counterfeit products leaving their countries. So it's a very serious thing that they're taking very seriously. One of the challenges that a lot of other U.S. suppliers were facing with getting the respirators delivered into the United States is the logistical part and actually getting them to arrive here on time, due to the shortage of the air cargo carriers and the severe shipment backlog that couriers like UPS, FedEx, and DHL have been dealing with and are still dealing with, and paired with the new export controls of U.S. government officials inspecting every particular shipment, it slowed down the shipments of masks getting into the U.S. quite a bit. The one thing that we did differently is we actually secure our own air cargo space and expedite the shipments. It costs a lot more than going with FedEx or DHL, but we make sure that we're getting these masks delivered on time.
Yeah, the FedEx, if you try to ship something from China to the US using FedEx or UPS, it can be upwards of 2 weeks from making the shipping label for them to actually put it on an airplane. The backlog is they're trying to catch up, but it's a real backlog.
Yeah, and you know, I agree with that. We've had a lot of trouble getting the product, and that's been a real challenge for us as well. Okay, let's move on. Greg, I don't know if there was anything you had to comment on that at all at this point, but should we move on here?
Yeah, no, I don't have anything.
Okay. So explain the different types of masks and their uses, and I think this is a big one as well, because there are a lot of different varieties, different levels, and so forth. Do you want to kind of go into some of that? Start out with you, Alex and Roman, and then I know Greg's got some comments with regard to different types of masks as well. So, Alex?
So I'll go over a little bit, but there's also the sharing thing that they can look at. So the biggest difference is there's two types of face coverings. Ones that look like surgical masks. They're 3-ply. The middle layer is melt-blown non-woven material, and that's the filtration level. So then there's also two inside and outside layers that are supposed to be food resistant, or that are food resistant. So those are 3-layered, and they are the ones sold in the US now for non-medical purposes. They're all standard, but for medical purposes, there's also 3 different layers and the filtration starts at 95 and goes to 98 or higher. And those are mostly for medical settings. For general purpose, the 3 layers is the standard way to do the surgical masks. And the biggest difference between those and the respirators is that they're loose fitting. So they still offer protection, but they don't have a tight seal like a respirator does. The respirator also has an extra layer or 2. So the filtration could be higher or better, but the biggest difference between a respirator and a surgical mask is the fitting over the mouth and the nose.
They both have very similar filtration standards. They have to be 95% or greater filtration efficiency against particles, dust, pollen, and there's 3 levels of the surgical style disposable face masks. The first level begins at 95% or greater filtration. The second and third are strictly for medical personnel and healthcare personnel because they have a higher fluid resistance rating. With that said, the N95 and also the KN95 respirators also have a great 95% or greater filtration against particles, as well as even higher fluid resistance than disposable face masks. So as far as protection is concerned, the KN95 respirator or the N95 offer the best protection and with the added benefit of having a very secure, tight fit.
Sure. Greg, I know you have some opinions on this, and some of your utilities are looking at things a little differently, and there's some concerns about some of these different types of products. So, Greg, you want to chime in here?
Sure. Yeah, Alex and Roman know their stuff when it comes to the construction of the product, but from the employee's perspective, from a wearer, nobody likes to wear them. Nobody wants to put a cover over their face.
Yep.
But the reality is, at least the current reality is, we have to have something. We look for something that, number one, that we can readily get. We can get it through the supply chain, and that's loosening up. And number two, something that is comfortable. And doesn't fog up our glasses. If it's uncomfortable and it actually creates another hazard, we're going to work around that. We're going to, we'll find something that doesn't do that for us. So, and as I mentioned before, if the employer, I'm going to look from the perspective of the employer with regard to the OSHA rule. If I'm going to require employees to wear a K95, then I will eventually, at some point, fall under the respiratory protection guidelines, which is requires a medical evaluation, fit testing, and annual fit testing and training. So that becomes a little problematic for some employers. Some already comply with that, if they have paint booths or, if they've got environments where that's already a requirement, but most don't. So, we're looking for something that's convenient, readily accessible, and comfortable.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on to the next question. Okay. And I think we kind of got ahead of ourselves a little bit here too, and we've the physical makeup differences, and I think there's layering differences and so forth. Anything else to add on that, gentlemen? Alex and Roman?
So to summarize, the standard 3-ply disposable face mask, surgical style, it's made of 3 layers. The inner and outside layer are non-woven fabric, which give it the fluid resistance properties. The inner layer is a melt-blown electrostatic fabric that gives it the filtration ability. So that's what makes them quite effective, is the unique construction. The main difference between, for example, a cloth mask and the 3-ply disposable mask is the cloth mask just doesn't have the fluid resistance due because it's a completely different fabric. As far as the KN95 mask, it's either made of 4 or 5 layers of the same material that the 3-ply is made of, with just additional 1 or 2 layers. So it gives you even greater protection against fluids and very high efficiency of filtration of 95% or greater. Both 3-ply and the KN95 were made of non-woven fabric and melt-blown electrostatic fabric for the filtration.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the next question here. List of approved vendors is changing daily. We know that. I think we've kind of alluded to some of those things. And what happens if my mask part number is not listed? And we've run across this several times already with our customers, and it's difficult to identify and to assure our customers that they're getting the product that they're supposed to be getting. Alex, back to you.
Thank you, Rick. I'll have someone go start on this.
So the FDA list is actually a recommendation list for medical settings, because the FDA exclusively deals with medical use of products. So they do change the list. The vendors keep changing. NIOSH started their own testing and putting up their own results. And there's also factories doing their own testing or third-party testing for products done by like people like us. I would say that it is okay to not have masks be on the FDA list, because the ones that are on the list are charging substantially more as well because they're on a list. But as I mentioned, the FDA list is specifically recommendations for medical setting, and it also says that it's just recommendations, and that masks not on the list that are good are totally fine, up to discretion of the people who are buying. Do you have something?
And as far as the packaging and the product numbers, we do have much greater control of this now. We can actually customize the packaging. I know this probably has created a lot of confusion because there was, Rick, you've probably received quite a few different brands. Some are difficult to match and they don't have part numbers. The masks come in plastic pouches that some of them don't have any kind of markings on them at all. So that creates the additional challenge of matching them to a specification sheet or the part number. You know, it was quite a challenge to start getting a lot of these masks in, so we didn't have the greatest control of having part numbers. Some of them don't have the markings that we need. So we definitely can exercise a greater ability to change the packaging and have that much easier to match to the part numbers listed on specification sheets.
Yeah, one of the things I want to assure all the customers that we have gotten the certifications from all of the masks that we have been supplying to our customers. A lot of that has been with the help of Alex and Roman. Some of them are difficult to locate. They have found them for us, and our other suppliers have helped us as well. But it is a difficult thing, but we do have those certifications of authorization from the FDA in-house. I don't know, Greg, was there anything there that you wanted to talk about? I don't want to leave you out of this here.
Not really. I appreciate very much the search for a high quality product. From my perspective, I just want people to catch the droplets that come out of your nose or your mouth when you cough, sneeze, or talk.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. So, okay, what do I need to look for on the packaging to match up with what the FDA Certification Registration is saying? And I know there are certain things to look for. Alex, you want to kind of give us our customers how we do that? How do we find those things off the packaging?
So on all of the packaging, the main box, usually there are boxes of 20 masks or 50 masks, it will state the factory name. And that same factory name will be on the FDA certificate. So the main place to look for is on the exterior of the box of the masks, and it will state the factory name and the brand of the mask, and that's how you would match it with the FDA certificate. They would be exact same identical names. And I know some of them might be different to pronounce, but I assure you they will have identical names, because you cannot get this product through the US Customs without the packaging matching the FDA certificate. So that's the job that US Customs does, is they make sure that all of that matches before they clear it into the country.
Great, thank you. I'd like to also add to that if our customers are listening to this and they have concerns about that, if you can take a picture of the side panel that shows that manufacturer's name, there's usually a list of multiple items on the side of that. If you have a concern, take a picture of that, happily from the FDA certification on that. So thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Okay, so we want some clarification on the FDA EUA. So I'm going to turn that back over to Roman and Alex, and we'll get that clarified here.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I think this is an important topic that we want to clarify, so that everybody's clear on what the FDA EUA is. EUA means Emergency Use Authorization. This is a guidance that FDA and authorization FDA put in place to help healthcare personnel source these respirators. And they've issued several lists with different factories, and that's not a comprehensive list because there's 3,000 factories that manufacture these respirators in China. And their main goal of the EUA is to help healthcare personnel source these respirators. This is a recommendation from FDA, and it's a very limited selection out of all the factories that manufacture these respirators. Of course, they don't have enough time to go through all 3,000 manufacturers to vet them. So it's really just a guidance and really aimed at medical personnel and healthcare hospitals to help source them certain products. It's in no way a list of approval or non-approval. It's just their advice. And as we discussed earlier, the CDC and NIOSH has started their own list and their own testing that they're doing now randomly. Two of our brands that we recently supplied to you guys are on the recent NIOSH list with very good test results. So I think the NIOSH has taken it a step further. They're actually doing testing versus the FDA. They're just compiling certain guidance recommendations.
And just want to add another thing is the reason that a lot of packaging has changed in the US was because of FDA, one of their EUAs advising to remove words like virus, antibacterial, medical. So in order to bring all those products into the US, a lot of the medical terminology had to be removed from the outside. Even if they offer similar quality, it just cannot be stated because they cannot market it as any medical product. So that's one of the also FDA EUAs, is to remove all those connections to it being a medical product.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thank you for the clarification on that. Greg, back at you. Anything? This is our last question for the panel today, but I think, is there anything else you'd like to add from the utilities perspective and your concerns and those type of things that we as a vendor need to address?
I don't think so, Rick. I know the supply chain has been challenging for everyone. Initially, it was a huge struggle, and a person at Oregon PUC has been working diligently as a liaison to really press the supply chain to get material out there for utilities. So, I really appreciate folks like you working with people like Alex and getting us the things that we need.
I appreciate that. There's also another I hate to bring up more webinars because I'm sure everybody is about had their fill of them. But I would like to, Greg, you want to bring up this webinar that's coming up today at 3:30 Pacific time. and what that is basically about. But probably similar to what we're doing, but more formal than us. So you want to bring that up?
Yeah, I got an email on that yesterday, late yesterday too. The subject matter is exactly this: N95s, KN95s, and some other 95s or 96s. I don't know what. There must be a half dozen or more, but it's hosted by FEMA and I believe Oregon Emergency Management. I'm not certain about that, but I wish I had I don't have the link to that in front of me, but that's.
Well, I think you
probably go on OEM.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's another avenue for this afternoon if people want to look at that. If anybody's watching this at this time and would like that connection, I would be happy to share that with you as well. So again, that's at 3:30 Pacific time today. So anyway, I would like to conclude this webinar. I hope that people got something out of it. I know sometimes this stuff gets dry and that type of thing. We try not to make it that way, but it's pretty hard not to. We're all trying to learn as we go through this process, including us as a vendor, and we're trying to help our customers the best we can. And this is one of the best ways for us to get that information out. So again, I'd like to thank our panel today with Alex and Roman from STAR, and also Greg Pierce. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit in with us on this and participate. It's been very valuable to us. So thank you so much for doing that.
It's my pleasure.
Gentlemen, have a great day.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex, Roman.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you
all.
guys. Thank you.
Take care.